All right. So much of chapter one really kind of is a um, overview of the entire financial planning process. And so I think it's important for you to understand that this is a big picture type of chapter, looks at a really big picture. And so we focus on what is financial planning, your life cycle, and how that's affected. And then, of course, you definitely have goals to set, and you have these unknown factors dealing with the economy, career choice, and income levels that you're going to have over time. Your book starts off with a couple of questions in terms of facts or fantasies. Your income level depends on age, education, and career choice. Well, yes, it does depend a lot on your age, education, and career choice. It's a lot, uh, you know, it's a lot more difficult for folks who, of course, when you're first starting out, you don't have any experience, or you might not have the education levels or other requirements for certain jobs, and so you're making a little bit less. You spend money on getting certain educational goals, but then you've got debt to deal with, but then you're getting access to better job opportunities as your knowledge base and skill base increase. You should be able to, make up for the indebtedness over time. And it makes more sense to do it while you're younger than while you're older. It's difficult when you get older because oftentimes you are often a target of because you're paid a high price, your high salary, and high cost to an organization. They often want you to retire. They often want you, um, you're targeted to be replaced. And so oftentimes after your 50, during your 50s or into your 60s, your income could potentially drop off quite a bit because no one wants to hire you. You're too expensive to hire. So there's some definite issues that are going to affect your income level over time.
Could I add something to that?
Of course, Clock. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm older, and the investments I made when I was younger are what I'm using to live off now to go back to school.
Mm.
So everyone who's young, you would be shocked at what it turns into over about 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
it really, I can't say how important that is. I've lived it. That's
Mm.
it.
Good advice. Good input. Thank you. Um, so basically speaking, I think that it's important to know that even though you may be getting a substantial amount of resources in your lifetime, they're not all. It's not a steady flow of resources. And as Clark pointed out, um, the resources for his situation were better in the beginning than they are now, but his investments are helping to carry those. So part of the choices you have to make when you do earn money is decide, well, do I want to spend it all? Or am I going to invest some of that, save some of that, invest it for a future where I may not be working, but I need money? And so those are questions. So yes, you are going to make a lot of money over your lifetime, but it doesn't come all at once. And not everyone is fortunate to have it as a stable, regular monthly thing for the rest of their life. It comes sometimes in patches. You might be making a ton of money this year, and then you get laid off or you lose your job the following year and you're in dire straits. And then you find a great job again and you're back to living the high life. Um, it's the ups and downs of life that really are things to manage. It's normal. And so I would take advantage of the fact when life is good and income is high that you don't spend all of it. And like Clark's advice, put some aside for down the road because you never know what's going to happen. Okay. So I think that this is where personal financial planning comes in. It's important to understand, first of all, I think your personal philosophy of money. You know, what does it mean to you? And what do you want to do with it? If your purpose of earning a lot of money is to impress other people, then you're going to be part of that keeping up with the Joneses crowd, right? Because every dollar you make, you're thinking, oh, I have to spend it on something that's going to prove to other people that I'm doing well. Well, you know, personally speaking, there are a lot of people that fall into that category. I would say that that's probably the most dangerous category to fall into because, quite frankly, who gives a rat's, backside of what other people think about your particular situation? You are in control of your life, and you're in control of your goals, and you're in control of your own happiness. It's not based on what other people think. It's based on what you think. And so you have your priorities, you have things that make you happy. That's what you should be using your financial resources for, right? And not to impress other people, because again, in life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And so that's one of those types of things that you need to consider and think about, okay? There are going to be ways in which you can improve your standard of living. So it's reasonable for some people to have a bigger house or a more expensive car or truck or SUV, depending on the needs that they might have at that time. But the more basic you can keep your life over the long run, the more likely you're going to have plenty of resources in the future. The problem is what we, in financial planning, we call it sort of like lifestyle inflation. The more money people make, they decide to spend it all. Now I make more money, I'm going to spend it on a new car. I'm going to spend it on a bigger house. I'm going to spend it on this and that. And they forget the very, very important economic concept called opportunity cost. Once you spend those resources, it's gone. They don't come back. And so you have to stop and think, why am I working? What's really important to me? If I do make money, what am I going to spend it on, right? And that's a big part of financial planning. That's a big part of what you're going to be asked to do, is to sit and think about what's important to you. How do you want to live your life? And once you do get financial resources, how to apply those resources to meet your goals, okay? And so there's nothing wrong with having a house or having a car or having decent clothing or whatnot. It just has to be planned, in essence. It can't be mindlessly wandering about and spending, which is what our society actually programs us to do. Our society never asks us to stop and think about why you're working or what's important to you. They're always asking you to buy something new. Oh, you need this or you need that. You need this new car. You need these new clothes, or you need something, right? Because that's how they make a living. Right? Businesses are in business to sell you stuff. Right? So that's our society, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to take a bite of every apple that's offered to you. And so I think it's important to sit and think what apples you do want to bite into, right? And not every apple is going to be appealing. But there might be some apples that are exactly part of the planning that you have in mind for yourself. And so that's some of the things that are part of this particular process. This is an individual, like it says right here, these are individual financial goals. Do I have my pen here? Where's my pen? Okay. These are individual financial affairs. Notice that there's no one success story out there. Everyone has their own form of success. And it doesn't always have to be financial in nature. When I was in college, there was a great author, Leo Buscaglia, who would always write about love. He came from a very poor, big family, Italian. He says, we never had much. We always lived in, subpar housing. We only had one car for like 8 people. We barely had enough food on the table, but we had a lot of love. We were a close-knit family. And so we were happy, although we didn't have a lot of material stuff. And I think that's true if if you've met people from around the world, there are a lot of people that are very, very happy that don't have much stuff, right? And so they don't have a lot of material goods, but they do have close-knit relationships. They do have their basic needs that are met. So we have to kind of sit and think about what we really need as human beings and what we would like to have, in essence, what we want as part of this, society that's based on selling products and looking good and having a certain image. Everyone's going to define that differently. So I'm going to ask you to think about what your definition is of your success, right? Is it really all tied up in material stuff? Or is it going to be tied, is it a balance between healthy relationships and good friendships and some material stuff? What is going to put it together for you? What's the formula for some type of happiness for you? Because I think in essence, that's going to be where you're going to put your money, right? Whatever is going to make you very, very happy is really where you're going to be directing your financial affairs. And so all of these are very, very personal decisions that need to be thought about. When you sit down with a financial planner, they're gonna ask you these types of questions. What is important to you right now? And maybe some people are not happy because they have too much debt. And so, well, getting out of debt is really important to me because I think that'll make you happy. I think that'll make me happy. Or buying a house, or having a retirement account and getting ready for that. There's a lot of goals people have over time. And so financial planners' jobs would be sitting down with you and saying, okay, let's put together some of the most important things that are for you right now. And let's turn those into some financial goals and some financial actions that will bring you the results that you want. Okay. But again, I'll repeat, this is somewhat limited to financial and material types of stuff. Okay. And not all, but a lot of it. And it doesn't mean that this is the entire picture. If you look at it holistically, there's more to life than just money and material stuff. It's a combination and a balance that really brings about a level of happiness and contentment that a lot of people are looking for. The problem is we are a society of extremes. We go to one extreme or another. We have it all or we have nothing. We're not happy with the middle. And we have to learn to be happy with something in the middle in order to get by quite well. Because most of us are in the middle. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can be very successful. There's nothing wrong with that. So your book talks about a couple of concepts. One of them is the propensity to consume. And this concept is an economic concept that applies in personal finance. How much of your check do you spend on the needs that you have, right? And how much of your check is actually saved for later? Because there's only two things you can actually do with money that you earn, okay? You have a paycheck that comes in. You have two choices. You can spend that paycheck, usually now, meaning within the pay period or the month. Or you can decide to invest that paycheck, save it, and spend it at a later date, okay? Maybe when you're not working anymore, maybe when you're older, or maybe spend it later for a particular goal, like purchasing a car or a down payment for a house. So the percentage of each dollar that you spend on your current needs is the propensity to consume, What we find is that lower income people tend to have a high propensity to consume because they don't make a lot of money, but they have a lot of needs. So their basic needs represent almost all of their paycheck. And so their propensity to consume is very high. Whereas wealthy individuals or folks that make a very high above average income don't need to spend all of their paycheck on basic needs. And so they're able to take care of their basic needs and have a lot of money left over that they decide to save for later. So their propensity to consume is a bit lower. Even though we like to think that we are always in the midst of accumulating wealth, it's hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. As you see from the information that's provided in the book, the median net worth of all families is about 100 grand. That means that on average, well, actually not even on average, right in the middle, most people, most families are only worth about $100,000 when it's all said and done. Okay. Now, because this is the median number, half of the population is below that, and half of the population is above it. So, and you know, this is usually after many, many years of trying. So as you see, if a lot of people, even though they like to accumulate a lot of wealth, as you can see here, it's very, very difficult to do. The reason it's difficult to do, believe it or not, is the basic needs that we have: housing, transportation, food, clothing, healthcare, etc., are expensive. So they soak up much of what we earn, leaving little for investment, okay, which is how you accumulate wealth. You invest, okay? You invest in financial assets, like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and you invest in tangible assets, like a house, right? Things that hopefully over time will be the source of your wealth. Housing is done pretty well in general, but a lot of people don't own houses. Less and less Americans own houses. So they're not part of this particular group. Right? And many, many people don't own stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. They don't have any investments. And so they're also not part of this group. And so you have a lot of Americans that basically, even though their desire is to accumulate wealth, they just don't have the means to accumulate the wealth. Okay, and this is just more of the same, okay? Accumulating wealth is often based on how much you earn. Income is very, very important. So, and I forgot the actual year your book uses for this. It's probably a couple years old. But the families earn a median income of $52,700 a year. That's a yearly, okay, figure. Why is that important? And why is it so difficult for families to accumulate wealth? Well, there was a study in Massachusetts. I worked in Massachusetts for 10 years at a community college there. There was a study in Massachusetts done in the early 2000s that said that it basically takes a family of four about $50,000 a year to live in Massachusetts. Which means that the this particular family, right? If the median family income is 52,000, they're basically spending it all on the needs: housing, transportation, healthcare, education, food, etc. So if you're spending your entire income on things that you need today, you can't possibly save for tomorrow. Right? It's very, very difficult. you have to learn to live on less in order to put some money aside today so you can have an investment for tomorrow. Okay.
I just moved from, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You have a question? Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say I just moved from New York City. And when I was looking for my last apartment, apartments that are $3,000 weren't big enough to hold my belongings. But to qualify for a $3,000 apartment, your income would have to be at least $120,000 or less. Just so you can see the difference of where you live and how it changes. You know, it's different in San Francisco, Boston, different.
Exactly.
But it's huge. It's not a little difference. Huge.
It's a big difference. And I think it's a good point, Clark, that the coasts are the most expensive places. So the Northeast, so you go looking from Boston to New York, down to Washington, D.C., this corridor there is exceptionally expensive to live in. And then out on the West Coast, you have your pockets from San Francisco down to LA and San Diego that are just incredibly expensive to live in. And so just imagine families that are making a lot of this money just simply to get by, because everything, the cost of living is very, very expensive. So this is one of the big problems that we have in this country is the income that most people are earning simply is just enough to cover the needs, sometimes not even enough to cover the needs of a family. And so they don't have any extra money to invest in certain assets that will help them get wealth in the future. The most common way of most Americans get their wealth is from home ownership, which is why it's often touted as the American dream. Yes, it could be for a lot of people. I've owned 4 homes myself, all in Massachusetts before I moved to New York. I haven't purchased anything in New York because I just don't like the tax structure here. I think the houses are affordable, but it's the amount of money that you have to pay for taxes on your property is outrageous. So I've chosen to rent in the 8 years that I've been here. Home ownership is for most people where they get most of their wealth. But of course, it comes at a cost, right? You have to borrow money to buy a home. There's anything that breaks or goes wrong with the house, you got to fix because you're the owner. It can suck up a lot of money, you know, and so it's not always the great investment people make it out to be. And a lot of people, like I say, don't have any money in the bank or have any money in retirement accounts or have any money in the stock market. And so they're not taking the stock markets at a new high, but who's taking advantage of it, right? Not that many people can take advantage of it because all of their income is being used to pay for housing, food, transportation, healthcare, et cetera. They don't have any extra money to make investments. Okay, so I wanted to go over not the 6-step system, but financial goals, and then the overview of your financial life. So financial goals basically fall into categories of long-term, short-term, and intermediate term. And so we look at basically you should be setting some long-term goals first in general. And the most important long-term goal you have, believe it or not, is saving for your retirement. And that's because when you are 70, 80 years old, you don't want to keep working, right? The wonderful thing about retirement is people aren't working. That's terrific. However, it takes planning because you still want the paycheck coming in. You still need money. And you can't rely on Social Security or continue to work at older ages. It's just, you can't rely on that. You need to, in essence, put some money aside that you're earning today, save it and invest it for your future. So that's something everybody has to do. And that's a long-term investment for a lot of folks in this class who are, around 20 years old. You've got 50 years of investing to do. And over that period of time, you can make a shitload of money if you invest wisely. And it doesn't take much. It might just be 20 bucks a week that you can put in. You can end up with multiples of millions of dollars in investments, depending on how the stock market does over the next 50 years. Over the last 100 years, roughly, it's done quite well. It's returned well over 10% a year in that period of time. And so if the future is anything like the past, it looks good. It looks good. So you should be putting some of that money aside for those types of goals. It doesn't take a lot of money to put aside today to make sure you're not poor when you're old and you can't afford to work. Most other financial goals tend to be, in many cases, short or intermediate term, short term, whatever you want to handle this year, within the next 12 months. Intermediate term, over a year, but say no more than 5 years away. Okay, so some people want to go ahead and have a down payment to purchase a home. Some people want to save money for their kids' college or for your college if you have to do it. A very important financial goal for folks who are in college now and living at home for a while and may still be living at home for a while longer is eventually you want to achieve financial independence. In other words, you don't want to depend on your parents or caretakers to fund everything that you do. That you want to make enough money to fund your needs, be it your housing needs, your transportation needs, your food, or other types of needs. You are doing all of that. That's financial independence. And that's an excellent goal for a lot of college students to have within the next 5 years. So it's more of an intermediate term goal, to be able to make enough money and to cover all their expenses, including perhaps moving out and having your own place. Again, a lot of it's depending on various circumstances, but it is a very, very good goal to have. One of the other goals that everybody is trying to grapple with is controlling those living expenses. I mean, you will always have to, you're either going to own or rent everything that you have. Car, house, you're going to own or rent it. And so I think in essence, one of the things you got to think about is the cost of doing each and making sure that you are controlling those living expenses as best you can. Just because you can afford a 3-bedroom apartment doesn't mean you should have one if it's only one person living there, right? If you live by yourself. It doesn't make any sense to pay for extra rooms that you don't use. So controlling those living expenses is important. Shopping around for the best deals on car insurance, purchasing a car that's going to be fit your budget, not be too expensive, but very reliable. Those types of things are ways in which we control our living expenses. Going food shopping, eating at home more often, buying in bulk might be ways in which we can control some food expenses. So there's lots of things to think about and prepare in terms of examples of financial goals. Okay. Okay, and here is what your book has for financial goals. There's a wonderful worksheet of financial goals in your book on page 12 from this fictional couple, the Taylors, Jack and Lily Taylor. I have never met them, but I'm sure they're lovely people. And there you have specific short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term financial goals. One of the things that makes it a financial goal is that it has a particular due date, and you can identify the actual cost of doing it. And so you can actually put money aside per check or per month in order to reach that goal. And that's really the most important thing about financial goals, is not just setting them, but setting them in a specific way where you know the cost, you have a date, and you know how much you need to put aside to get there. Your life cycle is big. Look at this chart. This is a very, very important chart in your life. As you notice here, the vertical axis is about income, and so as the line increases here, your income is increasing. This line was really about income. And then the vertical axis is your age. If you notice here, your peak earning years really are in your late 40s into your 50s, sometimes going into your upper 50s. Is really where the peak earning years are, okay, for most people. You're going to be, I got a lot of you are still in this particular category where, you know, you're basically an expense. Good thing your parents don't think like corporations. They might have laid you off, you know, to cut expenses. I thought about that with my kids, but, you know, anyway, I love them too much to do that. So if you notice here, and notice that babies are not expensive. Where you're most expensive is when you start becoming a preteen and a teenager, because you want this, you want that, you want this, you want that. Then it gets, you know, then your parents are kind of rolling their eyes quite a bit. And if you have kids, that's what you should be expecting someday. It's really that age where you start wanting everything in sight. But of course, you have no job and you have no income. So it's a tough situation, right? But a lot of people start working at 16, 17, and they start making a little bit of income. But it's usually after college. And again, this is where a lot of people spend quite a few years in college. Even though we're a 2-year school, in other words, we have associate's degrees, and so it's a 2-year program. At most schools, community colleges around the country, it takes the average student 4 years to complete a 2-year degree because of work, other obligations, not being able to go full-time all the time, things like this. It's more expensive at the 4-year level. So a bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree, they're planned out in 4 years full-time. However, even people that are going full-time or mostly full-time are getting their bachelor's degrees in 6 years. And so a 4-year degree has become a 6-year degree, simply because it takes a lot more time to get there, because a lot of people are basically financially strapped. They are required to work, they have cars, they have car insurance, they have gas, they have other types of expenses that they basically put up with their college education. And this is true at Dutchess, this is true at my college in Massachusetts when I was there. A lot of people are basically full of financial obligations. And sometimes they have to put job before school. And it basically puts off the completion of your degree or program. It does, either way, it costs money. Not going to work and studying costs money. But then again, needing to work and putting off your degree, that costs money. So it's not like one choice is free and the other choice costs money. They both cost money. So a lot of people just have to sit down and think about the opportunity cost. You know, is it better to get it over with now? I sacrifice some income today, make more tomorrow, you know, when I'm done, or do I have to balance it this way? You know, so these are some questions that a lot of people are always asking themselves and struggling with. It's not an easy choice, for sure. But look what happens after the median age of people that are getting married. For men, it's about 28, 29. For women, it's about 27. So usually when people are roughly around the time of getting married, that's really when they're starting a family. And so family formation periods are very common between your mid-20s and your mid-30s. And thus you have yet more people to be responsible for. Okay. So, this goes back in history. The reason that your kids have your name, particularly if you're a guy, is because they're your property and they're your responsibility financially. And so it doesn't really matter, whether you're making a lot or a little, you are financially responsible for this person until they're able to become an adult. And so this puts a lot of financial planning pressure on people to think about goals for kids. A lot of people put so much emphasis on saving for college. It's ridiculous, really. One of the more important things that people don't know is a study that was done many years ago. The best indicator of you going to college is having a good preschool. So the most important, I think more important than saving for college is saving for preschool, getting kids in preschool. Because in preschool, you think about it, you're 2 years and 9 months to 5 years before you go into kindergarten. You're learning lots of things in preschool compared to just being at home. In my generation, I stayed at home until I was 5 years old because we didn't have, there wasn't a need for preschool per se, or we didn't have very many preschools. But today, it's very important because preschool has a structured curriculum that teaches young kids how to get along with other people, how to express themselves, how to resolve conflict, things that are very important foundational stuff that they can carry with them through their successful school years. So actually, one of the most important predictors of college success is preschool. And a lot of people are not aware of those particular studies that have been done. But, this is something that's very, very important if you do decide at one point in time to have kids. Preschool is very important. So again, family formation is happening this time. People are purchasing houses. The average or the median age of housing purchase has been in the low 30s, 32, 33, 34 years old. And so when you have a house, you have another obligation financially. It's a big obligation. Your house might cost $200,000, but if you take a traditional 30-year mortgage on your house, you're going to be paying 2 to 3 times the amount for that house. So, and that's important to understand, right? So if you take out, if you buy a $200,000 house and you take out a traditional 30-year mortgage, you're going to be paying at least twice as much for that house over time. And so it looks like a $200,000 house, and it doesn't look like it's going to take up a lot of your lifetime earnings. But because most people need to pay it over a long period of time, it actually doubles and sometimes triples in cost, depending on the size of the house, the size of the loan, how long you take to pay it off, etc. And so that's one of those types of things where housing is, yes, it's the source of wealth for a lot of people in the lower and middle income brackets, but it's also the source of a lot of stress because it becomes, it absorbs a lot of your wealth over time. Does it pay back part of that wealth? It might. It might. It really depends. It really depends. If you notice as you get older, you have lots of other things. You start acquiring assets. And so you buy a house, you buy cars, you buy other types of things. You need to protect those assets, which is really what insurance is about. You have to make sure anything you own, you're liable for. So you have a big property, something happens on your property, it's your problem, even if you're not involved. Same thing with your car, either whether you're in your car or not in your car. If something happens with your car, people get hurt in your car, or you let someone borrow your car and they hurt somebody with your car because they hit someone. Guess whose problem is it? It's yours. It's your problem. Why? Because it's your car. The owners have the liability for when things go wrong. So protecting yourself is really the purpose of insurance, protecting those risks. We're always going to have the need to save. A lot of people like to start investing. A lot of people need to start retirement savings right away. People decide when they're either doing retirement savings or investment planning that they want to make sure that they're doing it in a way that limits the amount of taxes that they're paying. So tax planning becomes part of that circle within financial planning. And then, of course, if you own a business, and a lot of people own businesses, you're going to need to do some employee benefit planning, which is something that's also dealt with in financial planning. We're not dealing with it in this particular class, but in the broad world out there, financial planners deal with a whole bunch of stuff. There are also financial planners that specialize in many of these areas as well. And so you could get a financial planner who is really a good tax planner, or someone who is excellent at knowledge of insurance or estate planning. So, these are just areas that are part of it, but all of these are going to be part of your life at some point. As you get older, life gets a bit more complicated. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to manage that. And it is something that's manageable. A lot of people freak out about it, but it's actually really manageable. You just need help of other people. I'd say 2 or 3 of the most important people you'll need in your life. You're going to need a very good family lawyer. Without a doubt, one of the most important things you will need in your life is legal planning. Lawyers will help with a variety of types of things, but mostly they'll take care of things like estate planning. They'll also look out for any liability type of issues you might have, and make sure that the assets you're acquiring are free of any encumbrances, which are important. The second person you're really going to need in your life and worth spending money on is a very good personal or family accountant, someone who is great at tax planning, who understands investments and retirement accounts, someone who can help you with those types of things are very, very important. And the third most important person you might need in your life would be a financial planner, who can help you go through all these types of things. But I put them in that order because I think that's the most important. The personal or family lawyer, the personal or family accountant, and then a personal financial planner. Those folks are well worth spending some money on to help your life, for sure. Notice that during your life, there's a lot of changes going on. You're going to be, in a career development stage. You're going to be at a peak career stage where you're thinking about retirement. And then there'll be a time where you decide, well, I really don't want to work full time anymore, or I don't want to work anymore at all. And so part of those stages is planning. It's not like you can't reach these goals. It's just you need a plan. It just don't happen. It's just something that we have to be doing a lot of thinking about. But they can happen in a very, very good way over time. But this particular chart I really like because it does sort of go over, through the ages, some of the more important parts of life that you're going to be looking at in which financial planning becomes necessary, to be successful at these types of things. Now that particular chart is in your book on page 14, and I think it's well worth taking a peek at. Okay. All right, and one thing that your book also reviews in chapter 1 is how money grows over time. How money grows over time. And this is about the time value of money, which we're going to be looking at in lots of detail in chapter 2. but it introduces you it here in chapter 1. Here it looks at someone who has a job. You have to have income, and you can start something called an individual retirement account. It's called an IRA, but it's an individual retirement account. And you can start it at your local bank or credit union. You can start it at an investment company like a mutual fund company or a stock brokerage firm. In which case that you're putting a portion of your earnings into an account for the purposes of retirement. So the individual retirement account is you as an individual setting up an account at a bank or a mutual fund company or a brokerage firm specifically for your retirement. Okay. And it says here in this example, the sooner you start, the better. And this is what Clark had mentioned early on. If you put $2,000 aside, now $2,000 a year doesn't really sound, it sounds like a lot of money. But if you want to break that down into each week, it's about $38 a week. Okay, only about $38 a week, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, right? 38 bucks a week. If you put that aside in a retirement account and you start at age 40, okay, you're going to have, if it grows at 5% a year and you need it at age 65, you'll have about $95,000 for yourself at that time. But if you start, instead of starting at age 40, you start at age 30. That's just 10 years earlier. And you still get 5% a year. But now it's for 35 years instead of 25 years. You'll have twice as much, $180,000 there. So it's important to understand that over time, you can definitely, a little bit of money put aside now can mean a lot of money later on. And again, even today, I mean, many of you are close to 20 years old or 25 years old. Just imagine just sticking 20 bucks a week aside from your earnings. And 20 bucks is not a lot of money, but it can turn into a lot of money when you really need it down the road. Okay. And so we're going to be talking about this concept of the time value of money and how money grows over time. Again, the longer you leave money in an investment, right, at the higher rate of return, there's a big difference, right? 4%, if you had $1,000 and you left it in a account with 4% return over a long period of time, it would be $4,800. But if it was a higher return, you'd have a lot more money. You know, it would grow quite a bit. So the rate of return is important. And this is why the stock market is important, because investing in stock mutual funds, for example, in the stock market, will provide this type of difference in return. Okay. You can't do this with a small savings account at a bank because banks' interest rates are paying less than 1%. So you're not getting really anything on your money. You have to look for what we call investment options. And so this is why it's important to look at those other types of things. And again, it doesn't take a lot of money to start, okay? But it just takes time. This takes time. So I'm going to stop here. I think I also stopped the recording. Bring us back to our okay, stop the recording.